You've probably felt it already. That strange weight in your chest when you wake up, like the air itself is denser than it was last year. Miss Carley Nixon, who's been channeling messages from beings she calls the Seraphim for nearly 2 decades, says that sensation isn't anxiety, it's recognition. Your body already knows something's beginning, and what the Seraphim have been showing her about 2026 and the 4 years that follow, it's not about catastrophe. It's about reorganization. The kind where everything looks the same from the outside, while everything shifts underneath. If gentle, grounded voices help you make sense of strange times, settle in here. Because what we're about to explore won't make the world feel lighter, but it might make it feel more understandable. Why today already feels heavier than yesterday. The coffee tastes the same. The morning routine unfolds like always. But something unnamed has changed. People everywhere are reporting this exact sensation, a subtle thickness to ordinary moments, as if reality itself has taken on additional weight. Miss Carley Nixon describes it as the pre-shift density, the feeling that arrives before consciousness fully registers what's shifting. It's not depression, it's not fatigue, it's your nervous system responding to something it can't yet articulate. And the Seraphim say this heaviness isn't coming from outside events, it's coming from the inside, from the collective human field beginning to recognize that the familiar is ending. The heaviness shows up in unexpected places, in the extra second it takes to respond to a simple question, in the way laughter doesn't quite reach as deep as it used to, in how even good news lands with a muted quality, like it's traveling through some invisible buffer. Psychologists might call this ambient stress or low-grade overwhelm, but the Seraphim's interpretation goes deeper. They say humans are processing the end of an era that hasn't officially ended yet, and that processing creates friction, the friction between what was and what's trying to become. Most people feel it as heaviness because they're resisting without realizing they're resisting. What makes this particularly disorienting is that nothing dramatic has occurred to justify the feeling. No single event you can point to and say, that's when everything changed. Instead, it's cumulative. 1,000 small shifts that individually seem meaningless, but together create a completely different atmosphere. The Seraphim say this is intentional, not orchestrated by them, but by the nature of transformation itself. Abrupt change creates panic. Gradual density creates adaptation. And what humanity needs most right now is time to adapt to what's already begun. The Seraphim's 4-year pattern finally explained. The messages coming through Carley aren't apocalyptic visions or divine punishment. They're maps, descriptions of a pattern that the Seraphim say they've witnessed countless times across countless civilizations. A 4-year cycle where collective human consciousness reaches a saturation point, where the stories a culture tells itself no longer match the reality people are living, and something has to give. The pattern doesn't predict specific events. It describes the conditions under which rapid transformation becomes inevitable. And according to what's being channeled, those conditions are fully present right now. 2026 is year 1, and each year that follows carries a distinct quality. Year 1, 2026, is what the Seraphim call the recognition year. The year when what's been true beneath the surface becomes undeniable above it. Systems that have been failing quietly begin failing loudly. Lies that have been maintained through collective agreement lose their grip. People who've been sleepwalking start waking up, not all at once, but in waves. And the recognition isn't comfortable. It's the kind that makes you question everything you built your life around. Year 2 brings disorientation. The old maps don't work anymore, but the new ones haven't been drawn yet. Year 3 is when new patterns begin to solidify, when communities that resonate start finding each other. And Year 4 is integration, where the new normal stops feeling new. What's striking about this pattern is how precise it is. and how little control anyone has over its timing. The Seraphim say humans don't initiate these cycles. They occur when the collective field reaches critical mass, when enough individuals have privately questioned, privately doubted, privately sensed that something fundamental isn't working. And that private knowing accumulates until it reaches a threshold. Then it tips. And once tipping begins, the 4-year sequence unfolds with remarkable consistency. We're standing at the threshold right now. And whether we're ready or not, the tipping has already started. A woman in her 60s wrote to Carley last month describing something curious. She said she'd been journaling every morning for 40 years. Same routine, same notebook style, same quiet ritual. But recently, she noticed her handwriting had changed. Not dramatically, just slightly more urgent. The letters leaning forward where they used to stand straight. She couldn't explain why, didn't remember deciding to write differently. But there it was, on the page, her own hand showing her something her mind hadn't processed yet. Small changes like this are appearing everywhere, in how people hold their bodies, in the pauses between sentences, in what they suddenly can't pretend not to notice. 2026, the year everything quietly splits. Imagine a river that's been flowing in one direction for generations, and then, almost imperceptibly, it begins to fork. For a while, both channels run parallel, so similar you might not notice they're separate. But with every mile, the distance between them widens. The Seraphim describe 2026 as exactly this kind of fork. Not a dramatic split, a quiet divergence. 2 timelines, 2 ways of being, beginning to separate. One timeline continues clinging to the old models, insisting that what worked before will work again if we just try harder. The other timeline releases the old and reaches towards something different, and the strange part, both exist simultaneously for a time. The split isn't geographical or political in the way we usually think. It's perceptual. It's people in the same family, the same workplace, the same neighborhood, inhabiting completely different realities. One person sees collapse, another sees emergence. One experiences fear, another experiences liberation. And neither is wrong. They're just on different sides of the fork. The Seraphim say this divergence has already begun. That's why conversations that used to be possible now feel impossible. Why relationships that were solid suddenly strain. Not because anyone changed their values, but because they're standing in different rivers now. And rivers don't merge backward. What makes 2026 the critical year is that the fork becomes visible, becomes something people can consciously recognize and choose. Up until now, the divergence has been happening beneath awareness, but 2026 brings it to the surface. And once it's visible, neutrality becomes harder to maintain. Not impossible, but harder. People will increasingly find themselves pulled toward one timeline or the other, toward clinging or releasing, toward fear or trust, toward contraction or expansion. The Seraphim aren't judging either choice. They're simply saying the fork is here, and pretending it isn't won't make the rivers flow together again. But here's what the messages get specific about. And this is where it starts to touch your daily life in ways you can actually verify. The Seraphim describe 3 areas where the split will show up first. 3 domains where you'll notice the fork becoming real. And they're not abstract. They're as concrete as the body you live in, the people you love, and the choices you make when no one's watching. Ahead in this video, we're going to walk through each one, slowly, carefully, so you can recognize them when they arrive. Because recognition, that's the first step toward conscious navigation. What you'll notice first in your body. Your body has always been smarter than your mind, and it's about to prove it again. The first place most people will notice the timeline split is in their physical experience. not as illness necessarily, but as information. Sudden exhaustion that doesn't respond to rest, or unexpected surges of energy that arrive without cause. Sleep patterns disrupting, waking at 3 a.m. with clarity instead of grogginess. Appetite shifting, foods that were comforting suddenly feeling wrong. The Seraphim say these aren't symptoms of something broken. They're your body recalibrating to match the frequency of whichever timeline you're aligning with. And recalibration, it's always uncomfortable before it's complete. What people often miss is the emotional component woven through the physical. That tightness in your chest isn't just tension. It's your heart processing grief for a world that's ending. That buzzing in your hands isn't just nerves. It's your system becoming more sensitive to energy you couldn't feel before. The Seraphim describe the human body as an antenna, and during these 4 years, the antenna is being upgraded, not by choice, by necessity, because the old bandwidth can't receive what's coming through now. And the upgrade process, it feels like malfunction until you understand. Here's the detail most doctors won't have context for. The symptoms don't cluster in predictable patterns. One person experiences digestive upheaval, another vision changes, another inexplicable joint pain that migrates, and medical tests come back normal because there's nothing medically wrong. The body is just speaking a language most of modern medicine wasn't trained to hear. The Seraphim suggest paying attention to what your body is saying, not fixing it, but listening to it. Because these physical shifts are carrying messages about where you're aligned and where you're not. And alignment, that's the work of these 4 years. Love and loss won't work like before. Sit with someone you've known for years, and suddenly they feel like a stranger. Not because they changed, but because something in how you're perceiving them changed. Relationships built on shared assumptions are about to face a reckoning, and it won't always be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just a quiet recognition that you're not walking the same path anymore. The Seraphim say that love won't disappear during these 4 years, but it will reorganize around truth instead of comfort. And for relationships built primarily on comfort, that reorganization can feel like ending. The loss that's coming isn't always about people dying or leaving, though some of that will occur too. It's about the death of roles. The grandmother who's always been the family peacekeeper suddenly doesn't want to keep the peace anymore. The friend who was reliably available suddenly needs solitude. The partner who never questioned anything suddenly has questions about everything. And these shifts create a specific kind of grief, the grief of losing someone who's still physically present. The Seraphim call it living loss, and it's one of the hardest forms of goodbye because there's no ritual for it, no acknowledged ending, just a slow recognition that what was isn't anymore. What makes this particularly complex is that not everyone will shift at the same pace. One person in a relationship might cross the fork into new timeline energy while the other stays rooted in the old. And for a while, they can maintain the relationship through effort, through compromise, through pretending the gap isn't widening. But eventually, the distance becomes too great, and a choice has to be made. The Seraphim don't say this to create fear. They say it so people can grieve consciously, instead of resisting what's natural. Love doesn't end, but the form it takes, that's going to change for almost everyone. And accepting that change opens space for connections that match who you're becoming. Jobs and money following different rules now. The alarm goes off, and for the first time in 20 years, you can't remember why this job matters. It's not burnout, at least not the kind that a vacation would fix. It's a deeper questioning. The kind that asks whether trading hours of your life for money is a viable exchange anymore. The Seraphim say that 2026 will see massive disruption in how people relate to work. Not through mass unemployment necessarily, though some of that may occur, but through an internal collapse of the old bargain. The bargain that said if you do what you're told, stay productive, and don't make waves, you'll be secure. That bargain is breaking. And once it breaks internally, people can't unsee it. Money itself is becoming strange, not in value alone, but in meaning. People who've always felt secure in their savings suddenly feel vulnerable. People who've always been paycheck to paycheck suddenly feel oddly unbothered. And the difference isn't in their actual financial situation, it's in their relationship to security itself. The old timeline says security comes from accumulation. The new timeline says security comes from adaptability. And the gap between those two perspectives, it's creating an entire spectrum of responses. Some doubling down on accumulation, others releasing it entirely, and most people oscillating between the two. Here's a pattern starting to emerge that economists aren't tracking yet. Skilled people walking away from careers mid-trajectory with no plan for what's next, not recklessly, but decisively, as if something inside them knows that the skills they've spent decades building aren't the skills the next era needs. The Seraphim describe this as the great stepping back, a collective withdrawal from structures that no longer feed the soul. And it's happening quietly, one resignation at a time, one decision at a time, building towards something that will become visible only in retrospect. The old rules of work and money, they'll continue existing, but they'll be operating on an increasingly empty stage. Close your eyes for just a moment and notice your breath. Not controlling it, just noticing. That small act, that attention, is a kind of revolution. Because in a world that profits from your distraction, your presence is rebellion. The Seraphim say that the simplest practices are becoming the most powerful ones, not because they do anything dramatic, but because they root you in something real, while everything unreal falls away. Breath, presence, the feeling of ground beneath your feet. These aren't escapes from the transformation. They're how you stay conscious through it. Truth becomes harder to find than ever. The news says one thing, your neighbor says another, and the person you trust most says something entirely different, and all three sound equally certain. This isn't new, but it's accelerating. The Seraphim describe the next 4 years as a period of truth fragmentation, where shared reality becomes increasingly rare. Not because truth doesn't exist, but because the filters people use to perceive it are diverging so dramatically that the same event gets processed into completely contradictory narratives. And the contradiction, it's not reconcilable through more information, because the issue isn't lack of information, it's incompatible frameworks for interpreting information. What's emerging is something historians might recognize from other transitional periods: the collapse of trusted intermediaries. Institutions that once held the authority to say, "This is true," losing that authority. Not through scandal alone, though that's part of it, but through a deeper erosion of trust. And into the vacuum left by collapsed authority, 1,000 voices rush, each claiming truth, each demanding belief. And the average person trying to navigate daily life, they're drowning in signal without being able to distinguish it from noise. The Seraphim say this is temporary, but the temporary phase lasts the full 4 years. And during that time, discernment becomes the most valuable skill anyone can develop. The inner voice getting louder each month. You're washing dishes, and a thought arrives that's so clear it stops your hands mid-motion. Not your usual inner chatter, something quieter, more certain, and it says something you've been avoiding hearing. The Seraphim say that one of the most significant shifts of these 4 years is the amplification of inner knowing. The part of you that's always been there, but got drowned out by external noise. And that amplification isn't gentle, it's insistent, persistent, increasingly impossible to ignore. People who've spent decades dismissing their intuition will find it getting loud enough to interrupt their rational planning. And that interruption, it's not intrusive. It's corrective. What makes this different from ordinary intuition is the quality of the knowing that arrives. It doesn't argue with you, doesn't give you pros and cons, just delivers a simple, undeniable recognition. This person isn't safe. This direction is wrong. It's time to leave. And the rational mind wants to debate it, wants evidence, wants justification. But the knowing doesn't negotiate. It just is. The Seraphim describe this as the reactivation of what they call soul navigation, the capacity humans have always had, but largely forgot how to use. And during these 4 years, forgetting stops being an option, because external guidance systems are becoming too unreliable, and the only compass that still points true is the one inside. 3 things that make this worse accidentally. Most people trying to cope with uncertainty reach for 3 specific strategies, and all 3, according to the Seraphim, make the transition harder. The first is numbing, using substances, screens, busyness, or any other method to avoid feeling what's actually present. And numbing works, temporarily. It creates distance from discomfort. But it also creates distance from the information that discomfort is carrying. And that information, it's essential for navigation. The body's signals, the heart's warnings, the gut's knowing, all of it gets muffled when you're numb. And navigating these 4 years without those signals is like walking through fog without being able to feel the ground beneath your feet. The second strategy is over-preparation, the attempt to control every variable, plan for every contingency, and prevent every possible negative outcome. And preparation itself isn't wrong, but over-preparation becomes another form of resistance, a refusal to accept that some aspects of transformation can't be controlled. The Seraphim say the energy spent trying to make the future predictable is energy that could be used to build resilience for unpredictability. And resilience, the capacity to adapt, bend, and recover, that's far more valuable during these years than any amount of rigid planning. The future won't be controlled. The third strategy, and this one's subtle, is spiritual bypassing, using higher perspective to avoid dealing with practical reality. Everything happens for a reason. It's all part of the plan. Just trust the universe. And yes, there's truth in those statements. But when they're used to avoid taking necessary action, making hard choices, or feeling difficult emotions, they become another form of escape. The Seraphim aren't suggesting we abandon faith or higher perspective, just that we balance it with grounded, embodied presence, with willingness to feel what's hard, with courage to act even when the path isn't clear. Transcendence without embodiment doesn't serve these times. What the Seraphim say to do daily. The guidance coming through isn't complex, but it is consistent. First, ground daily, literally, feet on earth, hands in soil or water, body in contact with something real and unprocessed. The Seraphim say that during periods of rapid energetic shift, the human system needs physical anchoring to prevent floating into overwhelm or dissociation. And grounding doesn't require hours. Even 5 minutes of barefoot contact with earth recalibrates the nervous system in ways that meditation alone can't match. It reminds your body it's here, not lost in what might happen or what already happened. Here, now. And here now is the only place transformation can be navigated consciously. Second, simplify ruthlessly. Every possession you don't use, every commitment you don't mean, every relationship you're maintaining out of obligation rather than genuine connection, release it. Not because possessions and commitments are bad, but because during transition, carrying excess weight makes movement harder. The Seraphim describe the 4 years ahead as requiring agility, and agility isn't possible when you're buried under accumulation. This isn't about asceticism or deprivation. It's about becoming lighter, more mobile, more able to respond to what emerges instead of being tracked by what you've accumulated. People who navigate these years well will be those who learn to let go before circumstances forced it. Third, practice discernment hourly. Every piece of information that enters your awareness, pause before accepting it. Ask, does this feel true in my body? Does this align with what I directly witness? Does this serve my clarity or my confusion? The Seraphim aren't suggesting paranoia or blanket distrust, but they are suggesting that the signal-to-noise ratio is going to get worse before it gets better. And the people who maintain clarity will be those who learned to filter consciously, to separate what nourishes from what depletes, to trust their own knowing more than external authority. Discernment isn't a skill you develop once. It's a muscle you strengthen daily. Why this might be happening for us. What if none of this is punishment, or random chaos, or the universe indifferent to human suffering? The Seraphim offer a different frame. They say transformation at this scale only occurs when a species reaches a point where remaining the same would be more dangerous than changing. That humanity has built systems that are literally unsustainable, not just environmentally, but psychologically, spiritually, relationally. And those systems are breaking, not because we failed, but because we outgrew them. Like a snake shedding skin that no longer fits. The shedding is uncomfortable, but it's also necessary. And what's underneath, it's been there all along, just waiting for the old covering to finally release. This reframe doesn't minimize the difficulty. It doesn't make the grief less real or the uncertainty less frightening. But it does shift the meaning, from collapse to metamorphosis, from ending to transition, from loss to evolution. And meaning, that's what allows humans to endure almost anything. Viktor Frankl survived concentration camps not through hope that circumstances would improve, but through finding meaning within circumstances that couldn't be changed. The Seraphim say these 4 years are humanity's opportunity to find meaning in transformation itself, to see it not as something happening to us, but as something happening through us. And that shift in perception, it changes what's bearable. The other possibility the Seraphim offer is that we're not alone in this, that Earth itself is going through a shift, and humanity's transformation is interwoven with that larger planetary transition, not as victims of Earth changes, as participants, as co-creators of what emerges. And if that's true, if we're genuinely part of something larger than human drama, then our choices matter more than we realized. Every moment of presence, every act of kindness, every choice to meet fear with courage instead of contraction, they're not just personal victories. They're contributions to a collective field. And that field, according to the Seraphim, is what determines whether we navigate these 4 years towards something better or something worse. The world waiting 4 years from now, the messages don't describe utopia or dystopia. They describe something quieter, a world where people trust their inner knowing as much as external proof, where communities form around resonance instead of geography or ideology, where work serves life instead of life serving work, where the gap between who you are privately and who you present publicly narrows until it almost disappears, not because everyone becomes the same, but because pretending becomes too exhausting to maintain. And in the absence of pretending, something more honest emerges, more vulnerable, more real. The Seraphim say this isn't guaranteed. It's one possible outcome of the fork. The other outcome is more fragmentation, more fear, more control as the response to chaos. And both timelines will exist for a while, overlapping, intersecting, until eventually one gains enough momentum to become dominant. Which one depends on how many people can stay conscious through the transition, can resist the pull toward numbing or reactivity, can hold space for grief without drowning in it, can release the old without knowing what the new will look like. These aren't superhuman capacities. They're available to anyone willing to practice them. And the practice, it starts today. 4 years isn't forever, but it's long enough to become someone different. Long enough for new patterns to replace old ones. Long enough for what feels impossible now to become ordinary. And the Seraphim's final message is simpler than all the complexity that came before it. You're not broken. The world isn't ending. Something is ending. Something needed to end. And something else is beginning. And the beginning, it's always awkward, uncertain, uncomfortable. Birth is like that. But birth doesn't mean death. It means life arriving in a form you didn't expect. And these 4 years, however they unfold, they're the labor. What comes after, none of us know yet. But it's already being built, one choice at a time, one breath at a time. And you're part of that building, whether you realize it or not. There's an old teaching that says when the world is falling apart, the wise don't run. They sit very still and watch what was false fall away, revealing what was true all along. Maybe that's what these 4 years are. Not destruction, but revelation. Not collapse, but clarification. The Seraphim aren't asking you to believe them, or trust predictions, or abandon reason. They're asking you to notice, to pay attention to what you're actually experiencing, not what you're being told to experience. To trust the heaviness in your chest as information. To honor the inner voice when it speaks. To recognize that you felt this shift before, maybe in smaller ways, private ways, but this knowing isn't new. It's just finally loud enough to hear. And whether you call it channeled wisdom, or pattern recognition, or your own deep intuition finally breaking through, doesn't matter as much as whether you listen. Because listening, that's the first act of conscious navigation. And conscious navigation, that's the difference between being swept by the current and riding it. The water's moving either way, but how you meet it, that choice is still yours.